How's it going, YouTube? JR Juggernaut 1 is here. Hopefully this is working out. Angle-wise is working out good. I hope so. Hope you see my face. Hope you see good stuff. I'm going to stop acting weird. Okay, so I wanted to get this up earlier. This has been a crazy week for me as usual. I actually expect once I'm done with the LSAT for videos to get up kind of more frequently. Not more frequently per se, but just more conveniently, I think is the word I'm looking for. I just want to briefly talk about the YCS Toronto Aftermath. Afterwards, I'm going to make a vid just regarding a certain deck that I'm going to talk about. So basically what I've been noticing is from YCS Toronto is kind of how the format is looking to evolve. On one hand, I have some negative feelings towards the format, but they're mostly positive. My problems with what I've seen now, like, first off, big shout out to Josh Graham, who won YCS Toronto. I'll admit, I'm not a fan of his personality and his kind of cockiness, but at the same time, I respect the guy because he's good. He's a very good player. And when he talks crap, he backs it up. That's the thing that people kind of forget about him. So as much as people might hate him, I honestly have no problems with him. No significant ones anyway. I actually did play him in a Team War on Duelist Grounds once, and that's pretty much the only time I've actually played him. But what was funny about it is he's literally the only opponent I've ever... When I was doing the Clan Wars, I don't do them lately. I don't actually know whatever happened to my team and why we split up, but go figure. But when we were doing it, when our teams had to face... When our clans had to face each other, we faced each other... I was going to face him once, and it was just going to be, simple. I won. Then he proceeded to challenge me 3 more times in a row, and I beat him every single time. Not trying to say I'm better than him, because by God, he's definitely a better player than I am, but I just found that rather humorous, because I didn't know at the time that I was playing Josh Graham. And I found it afterwards, and I found out like later on, like a month or 2 later, and I was like, say what? Like, it was just a really big surprise to me, because I didn't think I would, like, it's not like, and I wasn't even playing some really derpy deck. I wasn't playing Rabbit or Dragons or anything like that. So I wasn't playing a meta deck. So I was like really surprised that this happened. Regardless, it was pretty cool. But also big shout out to Jeff Jones, who won with his big Psychic deck. Even though I hate the fact that now people are just gonna net deck him. I mean, it's annoying because you know that people are just gonna build his deck knowing, all this stuff. But the thing is, like, Jeff brought up a very good point. The problem is that, he doesn't like the deck as much because we're realizing, okay, this is becoming a format where back row is much more significant. So, and decks are still pretty explosive. Jeff's deck couldn't really do anything about that, except play Max C and Veiler, so he couldn't stop decks like Wine Drips for herp derping, which is why he realized it was such a bad matchup. I don't know, I don't feel comfortable playing a deck like that because it's just going to be a problem. If I played something like Agents now, for example, I would want to make sure that whatever I play some sort of back row, because I wouldn't feel comfortable playing it otherwise. I mean, that's a whole other discussion. I honestly don't see Agents working out. I don't see myself going back to that deck at all. But I could. If I did, I would have to play the tour guide build though, unfortunately, but yeah, it is what it is. I deal with it. I mean, I have one tour guide. I'm probably going to pick up a second one whenever I get the chance. Moving on. What was the other thing though? Oh, yeah. So, with the whole event, though, like, you see that with this event, most of the decks were playing at least a fair amount of traps, so they were able, so it was like, because decks were kind of moving, they were fairly aggressive, but not aggressive to the point where you couldn't really respond well with cards like Mirror Force and Deep Prison, which I thought was pretty awesome. Deep Prison was just, people are realizing it's become a very good card, this format. I mean, there's so many cards you want to deal with Deep Prison. Mirror Force is still good because it's like mass removal and it deals with a lot, but a lot of players will opt to run Deep Prison as well at the very least, because it deals with cards that are really annoying, like Zen Mains, Maystroke. Machina Fortress is now like a more popular card. Having Deep Prison to remove that problem from the equation is very nice. Just stuff like that. Otherwise, trying to think. Not much else I can really think about. I think I don't know if there's anything else significant with it, but yeah, just knowing that you can at least set cards, know that like it seems like attacks are more relevant. It's not stopping the play so much as you need to be able to stop their attacks, which is why Mirror Force actually has relevance now. It's not just the fact that it's at 2. Regardless, there are problems that still persist aside from that, like just with the decks themselves. In terms of what decks, though, that we're looking to see this format, at least for now, well, obviously windups. Obviously windups are going to be top tier because they're just stupid. There's really nothing else to say. Windup Factory is now the new Windup War. Is now is the new Black Whirlwind, which is dumb, really freaking dumb. But what are you gonna do? I think people, it's only because now you kind of need to compensate. Like Windup Factory can make for some more dead hands, but you kind of need it more because if you have your factories now, you can just kind of open up with. It'll let you make more. It'll let you set up for your broken ass plays, which is that's the point. Aside from that, the deck just has a lot of plays, and Shockmaster's a pain. End of story. What else? Well, Geargias, I personally think are overhyped. I think the deck is decent, but it's even especially with that what is it, I forget their names, but it's like the Geargia guy that flips and lets you search. I think that guy's good. The problem is, I think with decks like Geargias, even with whether it's Karakuri Geargia, Geargia Machina, Geargia Gadget, whatever you want to call it, my personal problem with it is that you have cards like Cyber Dragon and System Down that utterly wreck the matchup, and the deck isn't really explosive enough where it's going to be good as something like Windups. Sure, it's a fairly consistent deck, but even so, I think the lack of explosiveness ultimately comes back to bite it in the ass. That's just me, but I don't know. I think that's also a pretty fair argument to make about it. With what else? With other decks, I'm trying to think. Dark World, sort of. The deck showed that it's now relevant in this format because it's able to keep up with a slower meta, but it still loses to itself. That's still the problem that players are finding with it. Not a surprise, really. Other decks that really did make an impact. I'm trying to think. There were a bunch of decks. Well, I mean, Heroes. That's one of the other big decks that I'm seeing. There's just a lot of discussion with that, though, so I'm going to do that in another vid. Aside from that, there's just a lot of potentially viable decks. Even though there wasn't a huge variety of decks that topped YCS Toronto. It's still much more of a diversity than last year's YCS Toronto. Like this one, a lot of good players top, but at least this time we saw a greater diversity when it came to the decks. I mean, the Geargias decks, at least not all of those were the same, because you had Karakuri Geargias as well as Machina Geargias, which were piloted by at least Tyler Tadeo. Geargia, both of the decks have their advantages and disadvantages, whatever. I like either way. It's cool. Looking at the future, it's hard to say what we've got, what we're going to see later on, but for now, I like where this format's going. There's some cool decks to play. Overall, everything's pretty viable. There's not a lot of herp derp, at least, Rabbit can do some pretty broken plays, but at the same time, you can tell that the deck isn't as relevant, and you know that they're not going to derp you as much. They have to actually think about their plays more, which is always nice. Tell me what you guys thought about the event, because I mean, most people really reacted positively to it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. So leave a comment below, and until the next vid, guys.